Hello, everybody. This is the Podguyz Podcast, bringing it to you live as we do, 10:15 Eastern Standard Time. I'm Tony Cass.
Kevin Neary here.
Of course, we have the ever-loving Picasso, the dreamer of dreams, imaginary or not, the captain of the conspiracy theory, Les Marquet.
And he was just sergeant last year, so he got promoted. Welcome to the Pod Lizard People podcast. Tony, Sparky drew a very nice picture here of, I guess, us as lizard people and somebody screaming, "They are lizard people." It speaks for itself. This is some our guest Jonathan can really appreciate the specifics that went into that artwork because Jonathan, you can totally tell who the lizard people are and who isn't. Am I right?
Yeah, or at least that's what I'm going to tell you, right?
Yeah,
I can tell you what the differences are.
Of course,
we are specifically. Yeah.
We are joined in our fourth square today by none other than Jonathan Molik. Molik?
Yes, perfect. You said it just well.
Perfect.
Just right.
Perfect. He is, well, why don't you introduce yourself? I know you have a plethora of accomplishments in your life.
Oh, sure. Well, first, thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. Hopefully we'll have a good time tonight and we'll talk about some conspiracy theories and maybe we can figure out if we actually landed on the moon or not. We'll figure it out. But so I'm a military intelligence officer. I've been in the Army National Guard specifically for about 27 years now. I still do that today. So a lot of my daily focus is on foreign affairs and military conflict and threats that can affect the homeland as well as our allies downrange. And I'm also a former organized crime investigator. I worked for the New York State Attorney General's office for 14 years. So did a lot of wiretaps, arrested a lot of narcotics traffickers, about 100 felony defendant arrests in my career. So kind of seen a lot in that scope, if you will, everything from the depths of addiction all the way to the funny stuff that you can imagine knuckleheads talk about on the phone. So, yeah. So
well, let's start out from the top. We'll start from the top. We'll work our way down.
You got it.
Of course, the Army intelligence stuff. We'll start off first.
You got it.
That's a big can of worms. I just have a quick question, real quick, just about the organized crime stuff. Tony, you mind if I ask that?
I suppose.
It's okay. Real quick. When you guys, and I'm sure you've heard this before, when you guys talk about organized crime, is there the opposite side of the field where there's unorganized crime and you're like, these guys are terrible?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It happens all the time. As a matter of fact, most of the people we arrest are the unorganized crime because we're able to get arrested, right? There are some really good ones out there that often are big challenges and take us forever to arrest, or at least a really long time, and they're more organized. So yeah, you'd be surprised. We've arrested a lot of people that have been dealing with a large amount of narcotics, lots of guns, lots of violent stuff, and they're just dopey, and they end up in prison.
Do they always use the word like forget about it? Forget about it.
Yeah, so funny. So as a matter of fact, there is some still what we call wise guy crime down in, when I say down, right? I'm from upstate New York.
That's fucking great. You gotta classified under wise guy.
Yeah. So I'm from upstate New York, and so when I say down, I mean New York City. And so there's still some wise guy crime down in
even Northeast Pennsylvania has organized crime.
We have what you'd call unorganized crime.
Oh, it's very unorganized.
Yeah. But mostly everything that I dealt with, because there really isn't a lot of the old school, what you would consider traditional Italian mafia stuff, right? That you've seen in the movies. There isn't a lot of that in upstate. Actually, we do see some pretty sophisticated organized Chinese crime, and they deal specifically in human trafficking. That's their major crime that they're involved in. As a matter of fact, we had a Chinese organized crime hit 5 years ago here in upstate. They had a bunch of people that were working in a Chinese restaurant here in a little town called Guilderland, and they had 14 or 15 people living in the house, and a mother and father and two children were ended up shot and killed, shot in the face in the backyard, and
Wow.
left without a trace. So yeah, that's Chinese organized crime stuff. So it's around, but the vast majority of what you'd consider organized crime today is the narcotics trade. So large gangs or just narcotics organizations that are moving fentanyl across the border, or coke or heroin, or even marijuana from up north. I mean, that's not so much of a big deal anymore because it's illegal now. So, but yeah, that's what we go with.
Yeah, and that is the one hot word you hear every time on the news when it comes to drug overdose. It's the fentanyl, which is, if you're using it for correct, surgery, is a miracle drug for people to just not wake up from surgery and not have that much pain. But if you're using it to get high, it has been killing off people. It just feels counterproductive. If you're a drug dealer and you are giving people deadly doses of fentanyl, your clientele is not coming back to you because they're dead. So I never understood why they would even dive into that area, because it feels like it's too deadly of a drug to be continuously productive for a drug dealer, even as local as possible, unless you feel like strengthening their profits by cutting it up is that good of a reason.
Well, I'll give you a couple answers. There's actually some legitimate and logical reasons for that may seem silly, but it matters. So first, you're dealing with 90% of the heroin that's produced in the entire world is produced in Afghanistan and the countries that are around it. So Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. And when the United States and our NATO partners were in Afghanistan for 20 years, the opium production was reduced, and is reduced drastically. And so you had a challenge where you were not being able to get as much not being able to get as much heroin as you would think outside of Afghanistan, because most of the Afghanistan heroin went to Europe, right? If you're following me there.
Mm-hmm.
The other reason is that, so we had the oxy epidemic, right, during the 90s, and once the laws changed, once some of these companies went and were sued, the Sackler family being the most common, or the one that
the Purdue Pharma, yeah.
Yep. So they had the issue where they had people that were addicted to pills, oxys. They were transitioning to heroin because that's all that they could get their hands on. But at the same time, there was a good percentage of those people who didn't feel like it was socially acceptable to use heroin. So fentanyl dealers, specifically in Mexico, were turning powder fentanyl into pill fentanyl. And so it was able to give you the same feeling, or a very similar feeling, to oxys, but it would keep drawing in people from a socioeconomic class that didn't want to use heroin or pick up the needle. So
yeah, no, and that's a very articulately put response. Here's maybe some myths then about fentanyl, and just to clear it up for everybody out there. 0.1% of a speck can kill you. True or false?
True. So it depends on how much you have. Fentanyl is typically anywhere between 50 to 100 times more powerful than morphine. And when I left the Attorney General's office in 2021, we had just purchased hoods. Literally, these are hoods that you would wear on top of your head that would allow you to breathe, and had special gloves and allow you to process evidence that we knew had fentanyl inside of it, because you literally could get the fentanyl on your hands, and through the skin, if there was enough of it, you could end up going into cardiac arrest. So usually an overdose that leads to death won't come in the form of you just coming in contact with it. You can get really sick. Obviously, you can go into cardiac arrest. You can't need to go to the hospital. It's usually those that ingest it that will end up getting so much of it in there that they will pass away. But listen, it is very, very, very small amounts. Very small amounts.
And then, of course, there is the counterfeit drug game happening from a lot from China, I guess, from overseas. Do you know anything about that? Do you have any experience in that idea?
Yeah, so I don't know so much about the counterfeit, but what I can tell you is that the vast majority of the fentanyl that is used not only in Europe but in the United States does come from China. So it's produced in liquid form over there. They dump it into 55-gallon barrels. They ship it overseas into Mexico. Mexico produces this stuff into either powder or pill form, and then it's the cartels move this stuff across the border, across the southern border into the United States. So,
And now there always will be that crowd out there, and I don't know how to respond to them so politely of risk of humanity, but there's always going to be that crowd out there that says, why don't you just let people use it, die, and the problem solves itself? What would be your response to that, Jonathan? Besides, what the fuck is wrong with you? Holy shit!
Right? Yeah. So listen, I would be lying if I said I didn't run into a few cops, narcotics cops, that didn't have that opinion. I don't know how valid or how long or how far they would take that opinion, but we certainly had conversations like that. I think you just need to have a lack of empathy. If you don't have any empathy in you as a human, then you can have that.
And it doesn't help too much when these police officers are just worked 12 to 16-hour shifts in some degree, and they see the same person they have to keep arresting with the same drug on them. And now they have to go down and, during a frisk, they have to go down to the same hospital because they get needle. And it's a very thankless job in some areas where after a little bit of time, dude, people that work just at Burger King are like, I fucking hate this guy because he doesn't want me to put lettuce on his Whopper Jr. Imagine him trying to attack you, on a daily basis. The stress of that job is undeniable. So you can't really feel bad for a person that's that close to the situation, having that kind of feeling. I'm talking more or less about people that are way outside of the situation. I could apply that same sentiment to a lot of things where it's just like, people keep crashing their cars. Should we make them have the ability to stop better? You know what? Let them just keep crashing their cars. We'll get back to horses any day now.
Yeah, sure.
People's horses keep dying. Should we feel like there's a better way to help them live longer? We'll get back to walking. Let them all die. We'll have more meat to eat. It'll solve itself. You see how that lack of empathy equals redundancy, and we don't really get further as a people that way. And I try to explain this over and over again. And, it's tough, man. It's tough because people see it on the news all the time. It affects people's lives in good or bad ways. You have the weirdest thing where, some father was interviewed locally and he says, well, I'm going to miss my son now, but at least I don't have to hide the spoons.
Yeah. Yeah. It's heartbreaking. Put it that way. It's heartbreaking.
So what is the not necessarily the main focus of your particular job with organized crime, but are you more in the are you more out in the field, or are you doing a lot more technological stuff behind the scenes lately?
So when I was working for the organized crime task force, you do both. So I was I wore jeans and a t-shirt and a baseball hat to work every day, and had a UC car, and so some days we would sit in what we call the plant all day, which is the the wire room, and we'd listen to phone calls, and then other days I'd be on the street for 8, 10, 12, 15 hours, sitting on houses or doing mobile surveillance on dudes and following them down to New York, or whatever. Or there's a mix of both. You're sitting in the plant listening to calls, and then out of nowhere at 7 o'clock, somebody calls and said they're coming up from New York. So you all jump out, you get inside, you get with the team, grab the radio, and get out there and try to follow them.
What would you say is the percentage of the people that actually know that they're being followed and have surveillance on them?
Very few.
Very few?
Yeah. So
wow.
So let me be clear. There are people that are very good. Typically they're higher up the food chain, people that are working with larger amounts and have made a lot of money, and they're a challenge to watch because they are constantly looking. But your everyday person who's selling an ounce here or there, or selling, they're just caught up in their
they're
world.
They're begging to get caught.
Yeah. And again, a lot of it is arrogance. They just think, that they can't get caught, right? Or the money gets so tied up into their lifestyle that they're just chasing it so diligently that they just lose sight of the fact that somebody might actually be paying attention to them. And then, there's ways to blend, and, cops have tricks and things they do to try to blend in. And, so even people that do look, they don't see.
So would you say that organized crime has definitely changed in the realm for probably the past 40, 50 years? As far as organized crime is concerned, has it changed for you in general? So
yeah, well, I would say, like I was saying earlier, that there's there is certainly less of the Italian organized crime families,
Yeah.
La Cosa Nostra stuff that we all are aware of, the John Gottis of the world, right? Some of that stuff still exists, but it just doesn't like it used to. A lot of that has to do with the RICO statutes that were passed a couple of decades ago too, which, that was, and we have an equivalent one called enterprise corruption on the New York State side. So there are a lot of states that fell in line and passed their own laws that were very similar to RICO. And that's a very powerful tool for prosecutors because it allowed them to connect senior organization or senior individuals in an organization to behaviors that were illegal, and arrest them for that, where prior to that you would have to get them in an actual act themselves. And so now if you could just articulate to a judge and a jury that their orders, or not even their direct orders, but their influence that over other people in the organization, you could tie them to that and arrest them for it. So it was a challenge for organized crime to act and operate in the same ways that it did, because the new RICO statute really put the hammer down on them.
And it's kind of ironic, or coincidental, should I say, that the same prosecutor at the time, soon to be mayor, Rudy Giuliani, who loved using the RICO law, got RICO lawed himself.
Yeah,
later on.
Interestingly enough.
He did.
Yeah.
In life, he's and questioned it too. He's like, I don't understand this. It's like, you don't now.
Yeah. He's a sad story. Kind of a hero after 9/11, and now, not
I
so
think
much, but
the summarization of Rudy Giuliani cleaning up New York City, or at least helping clean up New York City, was extra funding towards the police. And it went a little something like this for people out there that weren't alive, and went a little something like this, where he said,
I feel like we should be playing like In the Arms of the Angel, but while you describe this.
No, it would be totally the wrong theme.
No,
absolutely the wrong theme.
Not a PETA moment.
I would say the dating game. Okay.
Oh.
And everybody comes in that lives in New York City. He's like, okay, who wants a job as a cop? And everyone's like, half the people raise their hand, and he's like, and the rest of you are going to jail. What? The techniques used by
not
Rudy
wrong,
Giuliani,
not wrong. By
undercover police had to I guess set up. There was such undercover usage at that time that watches had to be worn up top just so everybody knew who everybody was, to the point where they don't use that technique anymore because criminals have caught on to that concept. Which gets me to another thing I wanted to touch on real quick. I don't know if you've heard of the Chicago 50-50 rule.
No.
It's slang terminology. It's Chicago 50, and some people are now, referring to it as the 60-40 rule, as more like a funny thing. So where you have gang members, and you could say that the gang members, half of them are cops or informants on the way, that have broken into the gang territory. Sure. And the other side that they're trying to infiltrate as well also has half of them that are cops and half of them that are infiltrated. What happened down in Chicago about 3 years ago, where the only people that got hurt and injured but not dead were officers that actually shot each other, who weren't aware that they were also officers. The other actual real gang members did not hit anything with their bullets because they had not been trained properly with the weapons they were using.
Yeah. Oh boy.
I think we covered a great story about that one time, where it was undercover officers and then other undercover officers, and they never talked to each other. and they were trying to bust each other for drugs.
Yeah, and it does happen every now. That's like deep undercover kind of stuff. We have that where, and it's probably a better way to talk about drugs to kids if you're wondering if you're going to get caught. Let me just do the numbers for you. Half of your friends that are in this gang are cops. The other half are out on probation working for the police that are watching them. One other guy is actually a gang member. That's
bad
99
odds.
CIs.
Yeah, welfare.
One person who's selling drugs.
The welfare reform bill and the crime bill kind of implemented that into fast forward, and even the into the 80s they kind of pushed a little harder, where now they realized it's a little bit too misconstrued to keep building prisons all the time. So they figured, why not just work both angles, where you can go prison and healthcare, and they're building more rehabs and halfway houses anymore. When I say they, obviously I mean government, judge, private companies, the tiered list of people taking the cash on the side from the worst parts of society that do happen, some bad decisions that have been made along the way.
Sure.
I just have to clarify, because I can't stand when people use theys and thems too much. Like, you know what they're up to? The real people or the shadow government. It's like, dude, shut the fuck up. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
But yeah, they call it the Chicago 50-50 rule now, which
It makes sense. I can tell you my experience that when you arrest people and you tell them they're going to spend 8, 10, 12, 15, 20, 30 years in prison, they want to talk. At the end of the day, they're human just like anybody else, and they want to be there for their kids, and they want to see their mom before she dies, and whatever the story is. So a lot of people talk. And I can attest to multiple different jurisdictions and organizations coming upon each other, just like you were saying. Before I got on the job, I was an analyst for the DEA with the Army, which is kind of a weird thing, but I did that for a few years before I got to the AG's office, and they were doing one of the agents was doing a massive marijuana case. So this is a long time ago. Oh, I want to say 2006 or 7, probably. Big weed case, and it had a connection out to Arizona, and it come to find out the DEA went out to do a rip on the individual who was selling the marijuana in Arizona, and it turned out that the guy who was selling the marijuana was a UC for another agency. So
that's great.
Thankfully nobody got hurt. The challenge there is that the benefits of working in our government system is we have the federal system, the state system, the county system, and there are breaks between that stuff. But sometimes that turns into a problem, and here that's exactly what happened.
There's slips in the pavement.
Yeah, there was a county investigation that had no connection to the federal investigation whatsoever, and there was no way for the two to communicate. In New York State, that's different. There's an actual database that exists that all agencies have a connection and have access to. And if they're doing the right thing, they're putting in their target names or target phone numbers and ensuring that another agency isn't already looking at that individual for an officer. Well, first of all, it's more efficient.
How beneficial and how deterring is that particular system as well? Because, of course, dirty cops are everywhere. You can't weed out everybody, to be honest. So,
if you're to do a risk assessment on that, right, the amount of dirty cops are way less than the benefit that you get out of sharing that information. And as a matter of fact, you end up things become more efficient, because what you'll find out is if you put a name in there, let's say you may put your main target in there, but you may also put in your target's friend and your target's second friend. Now, you're not putting just everybody. They have to have a connection to the illicit behavior, but maybe you don't know anything about that second or third person, only that they showed up once on a
what do they call that? The criminal tree or something like that?
Yeah. So yeah. Yep. And then, but if you put the name in the system in order to ensure that you're not crossing paths with other PDs, that person might be a target of another PD. Now you join forces in a sense, and you're saving resources because you're not doing things contemporaneously, right? And gathering the same information.
So I guess my main question would be, like, let's say that's a good bust for you, and you're on it. You've been working this for months. You've been working a case for a couple months, and all of a sudden, FBI, CIA, somebody comes in and says, "Oh man, this is bigger than you. We're taking over your case."
Yeah, so first of all, if it were the CIA, we would have a real problem because they shouldn't be operating in the U.S. But I get your point, right? Yeah, it's
someone bigger than yourself is what I'm saying.
Yes, yeah, no doubt. Well, so I've been in that position because I work for a state agency, and there's plenty of times when we would go in and talk to the local PDs and say, "Hey, listen, I know you've been looking at this knucklehead, but this knucklehead is part of a much bigger thing, and we're gonna do our thing and try to go forward with them." Now, the problem is for them is they can't tell you what to do, right? The federal government, if I'm prosecuting a state case and I'm building on state law, which has no connection to the federal government whatsoever, there is no authority that the FBI has to come into my office and say, I'm taking this target. It doesn't exist.
Oh, so, like you see in the movies where it's always, but this is my case. You mean this was your case? We're taking
no. It doesn't work that way. Now, that's not to say that bosses wouldn't necessarily get involved, and that's not to say that people won't sit down and have a conversation and say, "Hey, listen, let me explain to you why this is a better idea that we take this case," and we'll take the case.
Oh man, I can see it already happening. Molik, in my office right now. Listen, you're off the case. All right, I want you to take 2 weeks vacation. Paid, of course. Take the wife somewhere nice.
Yeah.
And
we know you've been working endless hours.
Just relax.
70 hours a week.
Yep.
Molik, we've all decided here. You're too close.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you're one good bus away.
That's one thing I gotta say this, man. That's one thing I never understood. Where it's like, the fuck do you mean he's too close to it? It's like you're getting too close to solving the crime. We don't need that shit happening. Budget is up in about a week. We think you're about 24 hours away from cracking this baby. All right. So take 6 days, come back here, solve the case. We all get budget emphasis involved.
Hey, I'll give you a good example. So on Netflix, there's a documentary called Get Gotti. And as a matter of fact, that documentary showcases rather the FBI on one side and the Organized Crime Task Force on the other side. That Organized Crime Task Force that's in that documentary is the agency that I worked for. And so that part of the theme of that documentary in the multiple episodes that it has was the FBI and OCTF were both investigating Gotti at the same time. And so the FBI was using its federal jurisdiction. The state was using its state jurisdiction. OCTF had some more clever investigators and had some techniques that they were using that the FBI wasn't using. And so there were plenty of times when the two would meet and they would try to get a case together so they could work at the same, but they didn't want, then politics got involved. So OCTF split back off and the FBI split back off. Watch the series. They end up getting together at the end and Gotti goes to prison. But the point is that show demonstrates no matter how interested the FBI was, they had no authority to come in and tell OCTF, you're off this thing. We're getting Gotti. Just tell them to pound salt. That's the way it works.
Man, I had a thought pattern, and I'm like, oh shit. The organized crime situation. Who actually funds that? Is that the national government, or is that the government, or is it like a statewide, or is it like private?
Yeah, so this Organized Crime Task Force that I was referring to is and who I used to work for. It kind of has an interesting history. It's just in New York State, at least this entity that I'm talking about. And it was originally designed, it was paid for by and created by the New York State Legislature. And it was a specific entity that brought in investigators and detectives from multiple different agencies to work together in this task force element, specifically to go after wise guy crime down in New York City. And so it was made up of investigators from multiple agencies, include the state police, but all statewide. It didn't have any federal connection. It was not a federal task force. But because the Organized Crime Task Force wasn't an agency of itself, in and of itself, you needed to pay these people, and you needed like an HR department. So they put them under the purview of the Attorney General's office. because the attorney general being the senior prosecutor for the state, right? Well,
Okay.
eventually organized crime, the OCTF continued to exist, and it kind of just ended up morphing itself under the attorney general. And now in New York State, it is an attorney general's task force. So it's still called OCTF. We still work with multiple agencies. We're often partnering with the New York State Police or the local county deputies if we're doing that type of a case. But they're all like now they're employees of the Attorney General's office and
So
come out of the Attorney General's budget.
So just real quick, Jonathan, kind of keeping in the same realm of things. What is your favorite mafia TV series, and why is it The Sopranos? And what is your least favorite mafia TV series, and also why is it Tulsa King?
Wait,
Yeah.
Sparky, did you get my text in Facebook Messenger as well?
No, I didn't.
Okay, check it out before you go.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So
Send me a text on my phone.
Your
I
favorite
did.
now, guys, this is an important question I've already answered for him. Why is your favorite The Sopranos and your least favorite The Tulsa King?
Yeah, I'm gonna give you a cop-out answer here. I've actually never seen The Sopranos all the way through.
Whoa, all the way through. Oh,
Yeah. So, and I'll tell you why. Because not that it's not a great show, and I've seen some episodes and great. Sopranos is great, but the best TV show on HBO ever was The Wire, and the reason because that's the most realistic show I've ever seen when it comes to law enforcement. What they were doing during The Wire, all of the things the cops did, all the things the bad guys did, all of that stuff is real. It works just like that, minus the payphones, because we don't have those anymore. But every cop office has a drunk. Every cop office has the strong-willed female. Every bad guy organization has the smart guy who wants to go to college. They have the dopes. It was surreal how realistic The Wire was, and what a great show. And I have no idea what the Tulsa King is.
Yeah. Oh my God. So let me just explain it to you real quick. You're gonna hate.
By the way,
every
you're not
moment
missing
of
anything.
This explanation, okay? So you're familiar with, and I'm sure you'd never lived under a rock, so you know Sylvester Stallone. He's played Rocky, and that's it. He's played PTSD Rocky. We know him as Rambo, but he's basically PTSD Rocky. Sorry, same guy, same whatever attitude. So now Rocky is in the mafia, and he's a little bit older now, and the brain damage is left. So it's basically Rocky 3, but he's in the mafia. He's got a goatee, and every scenario and acting scene that he's in possibly is just forced action. I've never seen more scenes that have just been forced. Jonathan, I tell you what, Tony Danza could outact in this fucking show much better than Sylvester Stallone. Because I would think that Tony's Danza without a laugh track could really bring an element of drama just by being confused why he's in such an okay written script. Okay. And I mean, barely okay. You could just take out 3 parts of every action that has to be done per scene, and it would feel like The Wire, because nothing like what happens in the Tulsa King ever happens in any sane reality possible in any bar scene. Everything is just too coincidentally put together, where you're like, did somebody just write this fiction out of nowhere? Am I supposed to believe this bullshit that is barely a cusp above a Lifetime movie starring Patrick Duffy? Holy shit, what garbage is this? And you can only watch maybe 2 scenes. If you're going 3 scenes, you're on Fear Factor, and you're fucking winning the show, because everyone else has just hit the red button to get off the goddamn ride. I love The Wire, by the way. A very great show. Big question, though. You brought up payphones. Should they bring payphones back just so you can tap a wire?
Good question.
just because somebody should say, like, do you see a payphone nearby? Yeah, use the payphone and talk very specifically and freely into the payphone. Yeah. How many people would you catch just by doing that alone?
Well, it's funny. That's actually a serious question there. One of the challenges in law enforcement when they used a payphone is that you had to be there to see them on the device. And so if the payphone, obviously it's a physical device and you have to be within a certain a certain range for you to see them with a camera or to see them in person. So you have to physically see them on the device. That's not the case with cell phones, and we can tap cell phones today. And so I don't have the ability to see somebody on their cell phone when they're in their house if I don't have a search warrant. And so that legal standard is different today. Now, there's other things that I have to present as to how I know that person is using that phone, like their voice as one avenue to do that. But I don't have to be on the street and watch them. So my boss, for example, when I first got on the job, he had been with OCTF for years and years and years, and he did some wise guy crime down in New York. And when he first got on, so this would be the very early 90s, he just got out of the academy, and all his job was to show up to work every day down in Manhattan and get to the same payphone at 07 every day. And he'd sit on that phone until about 8 o'clock at night. And he would just write down every single time somebody came to the payphone, who it was and when they made a phone call. Because back in the wire room, they were wiretapping that payphone, obviously, but they didn't have any surveillance cameras. So they used Billy, my boss, to put those two things together and say, I had surveillance on the phone at the same time Knucklehead 1 was talking. Again, we don't have to do that anymore. So it's actually easier with cell phones.
Yeah, it just reminded me of that Colin Farrell movie where he was in a payphone and I'm like, wow, guys, way to save budget on a movie right there, where you're like, all you got to do is stay in one spot, maybe hit up some screenshots. But Sparky does his own investigation journalistically, and he refuses to use this new technology on the cell phones. He's very bad with technology, but he's very amazing with a whiteboard wash away, and his memory is as crystal clear as anything. So he basically draws what he sees and redraws it in such vivid specifications that would blow your mind. If Sparky would just flip over that board real quick, we could see exactly what he's talking about there. It says, now let's get to business. Hey, are those the same cannolis from 3 weeks ago? Forget about it. Who would bug the cannolis, as you can see underneath? Now, Jonathan, it happens to be the most bugged food in the world. Is that race specific to the Italians, or is it just because everyone likes a cannoli?
Everyone likes a cannoli.
I thought so.
That's why we use it. Yep.
Yeah.
John, in your illustrious, of course, investigative and intelligence background, what is the weirdest thing that you have personally bugged?
Okay. I've never personally bugged anything. We actually have a technical unit that does that. Okay. So I've never put my fingers on it myself, although as a senior on 3 of the wires that we worked while I was there for 14 years, I was what we called the Affian, so the senior investigator. So I would suggest certain places and certain things, and then we had the tech guys go out and do it. Okay. I don't really have anything that I can recall that was all that crazy. I mean, you bug plants. Yeah. I mean, the cool thing is nowadays what we do is we get what we call no-knock warrants, and we also get, special warrants that have to be obviously signed off by a judge, but they're more special. They're the ones that allow us to break in. And so we'll break into a house in the middle of the night, not just regular warrants where we smack the door and tell everybody we're there, but we'll literally break into the house and we'll take a picture and video of how everything looks in the house. Then we'll set up a bunch of things. We'll do some things with their computers, some other stuff. We'll put some cameras in places and mics and different things. And then we'll leave as if nothing has ever happened, and then we'll have access to the house, obviously, and then we'll monitor for.
Are the most suspicious people the ones with Faraday bags?
Yeah. So if you're carrying around one of those, you're either a criminal or you've been in the intelligence field for a very long time, and you're
just really bad at racquetball packing. Why am I here? What does the sport consist? I don't think anybody actually knows the rules to racquetball, and it's just like one of those things that Wall Street people used to do to blow off their cocaine high. Like, what do I do with all this energy? Well, we can't go outside. Let's use smaller rackets and a ball. Not sure.
Potentially,
I have no idea.
It's like the new pickleball, maybe. Too.
Yeah, what the fuck is pickleball? Pickleball feels like the lazier version of anything active. And they're like, you don't really have to be athletic.
Squash. It's the new squash.
Like it's the only way to force feed a vegetable on the
Yeah.
sport. Sparky, what do you got with that beautiful?
Oh, he's got one more. He's got a back-to-back.
Firing up there. Quick and hurry up and bug the bush. Do not touch me, says the bush. Now, this is a callback from Tony's only time he's been flagged on Facebook for sharing a fake story about Kanye West dressing up like a bush to spy on his children through the windows. So I guess he was doubtfiring himself in bush or shrub mode, and turned out to be it got reported, Jonathan. Okay, so it got reported.
All
so
on
we're
video camera.
Dude, we are convinced that Kanye West was watching our show and so pissed that he's like, I want that story taken down.
That's fake.
Yeah. It's a horrible. It's a possibility that could happen. But
we are going to play a little game though. However,
oh my god, a game!
I know we have a game. Well, I have a game. I guess.
Should I do the dating game thing or no?
Yeah, let's do the dating game thing.
We actually, the last game that we played was very successful, Jonathan. It was a who said it, since somebody was very offended that old Power Ranger, the Red Ranger or whatever, he went a little berserker. He made his own warrior brand, and one of the quotes on the warrior brand was actually of Adolf Hitler, and people were like offended greatly. But when reading the quote back, I was like, there's no way you would absolutely know that that's something Hitler would say, because it was very generic, so in my opinion. So we played the game, who said it, Hitler or blank. And man, dude, people scored like 35% on that game, because it was like, dude, and the one was like Hitler or Neil deGrasse Tyson, and it was Hitler, and everybody's like, that's got to be Neil deGrasse Tyson.
I'm sure he would appreciate that. Very well.
Oh, John, in this particular game, it's top 10 government conspiracies. Yes or no? Is it a thing? Is it not a thing? You don't have to go into details. You could just be like, it's a thing, it's not a thing.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, this is going to be a fun one. Number one on the list, of course, JFK assassination is the number one on everybody's list as far as the top 10 government conspiracies. Did the government do it? Yay or nay?
No. Presidents get shot. That's kind of something that happens in the history of the United States. Shot, stabbed, whatever. I get the concern. Let's put it that way, because at that time in the U.S. during the mid 20th century and before, the CIA was involved in some things that they probably shouldn't have been involved in. All the way into Iran-Contra and some of the other stories that have come out and have been declassified. So I get why people would think, there's this and that. Listen,
there have been pettier. You're right, though, Jonathan. There have been a lot of pettier, declassified CIA, scenarios out there, like giving people in the Panama Canal gonorrhea just to see if it was different because of the equator impact. MK Ultra giving people acid, such as the most famous of famous, Ted Kaczynski, Charles Manson. And we all see how that kind of spoiled the surprise of, I guess acid, giving people acid every day was kind of messes them up.
Yeah. The problem with the JFK is the story is the same problem with the moon landing. You can't hide that information. You just can't. All right. There's too many people that know. And there's a whole bunch of other facts that also prove that JFK was actually shot. But I just mean from a conspiracy theory standpoint, listen, people can't even keep secrets from their wife, and you're not going to get thousands and thousands and thousands of people that have access to information, and they're going to be able to keep it to themselves. So that's just not the case. JFK was unfortunately shot.
There'd be too many leaks. I totally agree with you there. Just, was he shot by who we have to write down
that guy? Yep, Oswald was a problem. He was deranged. He did have the capability. I know that there's talk out there that there's no way he could have made that shot. He could have
the angles of the bullet, the multiple shots, the
Yeah.
The
So
splatter, everything.
Yep. No, so sometimes things do look funky, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily untrue, right? Or the the less
I mean,
the
Arlen Specter's magic bullet theory seemed the least true of any haunted tale I've ever told anybody.
Yeah.
And then you wouldn't believe what the bullet did next.
True.
Go on, sir. The bullet's been at this for half an hour. What is the bullet doing now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Time traveled through a fucking wormhole. Got some KFC. I don't know why I had to say KFC.
yeah.
like-
Yeah. I was saying earlier too, not to belabor on the JFK one, we got to get through the story here, but I've been to Dallas and I've been in the repository and I've stood next to the window where JFK was shot. And it's an eerie place to be. It does bring you, if you have a passion for US history and those things, that it does put you in a special place. But tactically speaking, it's not a hard shot to take. I mean, I was just standing in, like, it doesn't take a lot of training to pick up a single shot rifle and make that shot. I mean, it's not easy, but it's also not impossible. So
my biggest problem with it wasn't even like all the shots. It was just the delay by Secret Service. Because if I'm going to do something, those are the first guys you got to make sure aren't really jumping at the situation. I'm not trying to speculate too far into it, but it just seems very specific when your one and only job is to, if you hear gunshot, jump on the guy that is the highest valuable person that would be shot in this scenario. One gunshot, one firework go off, jump into that direction. And that wasn't really done.
Yeah, I wasn't there, but I have been in scenarios where gunshots have been around, and sometimes you react the way that you were trained, and sometimes you don't. And there's a lot of people. It doesn't even matter how well trained you are. You can get the most training that the U.S. government can have available at its fingertips, and until that day comes when that first shot is fired and you're there, you have no idea how you're going to react until it happens. And there's people that you would assume are the worst and they're the best in combat, and then there's the tough guys and they just can't make it.
Maybe there's like a Curb Your Enthusiasm kind of Seinfeld-y thing that might have happened where JFK comes back with coffees for everybody except the Secret Service, and they're like,
yeah. Potentially.
Music starts playing, and they're like,
yeah, right.
All right, we'll move on to number 2, of course.
Yeah.
Flat Earthers.
Oh, I don't want to waste my time.
Ridiculous.
there you go.
Yeah.
Roll right out there, Jonathan. I love it. Get rid of them. Get
Listen, so I'll give you a little bit of from my world, right? We have access to and use military collection platforms all over the world, and all of those platforms are calculated and based off the fact that the world is round. That's it. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, and
rampant stupidity.
I'll say a little bit more. If you believe the Earth is flat, you're a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
It feels like just not a theory, but people that wanted one day to just say the opposite because the opposite in some scenarios was actually the truth.
Sure.
So it's almost like somebody just had say the opposite over and over and over again, and then we got into the whole is the Earth flat Copernicus idea. It was Copernicus, something like that. But no, it is bullshit. Tony, number 3.
Number 3, of course, subliminal advertising in poor communities.
Subliminal advertising in poor communities. Well, definitely not my expertise. And I would have to know more about what they're trying to do. But I guess I would say, there's some certain marketing themes out there that are often specific. Yeah. But not my expertise.
I love the answer, but no, I know where Tony is going with that. And there's a reason why when you're a kid watching cartoons, and it's going to be different now with commercial break comes up and there's that clown looking at you with the hamburger and all of his cartoon friends saying, hey, you're going to want to hang out with us, sort of thing. And playing messages throughout commercials at a much higher speed can subconsciously get into people's heads, especially the young, and have them think that that is the place to go. But no, it's I guess what was they tried using it in Iraq or Desert Storm for some odd reason. I don't know. There was a whole thing on it. But number 4, Tony, number 4.
Number 4, of course, with FISA, of course, FISA, Congress enacted Section 702 of of FISA, which is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and a critical intelligence collection authority that enables the intelligence community to collect, analyze, and appropriately share foreign intelligence information. Does that include everyone's cell phone, knowingly or unknowingly?
Oh, no, not even close. So
not even
everything
close.
in your
Okay.
everything in your description is correct.
Okay.
The problem is with FISA, and this is what everybody gets concerned about, and it became even more of a concern during President Trump's campaign. The problem is FISA gives, first of all, let me start from the beginning. You don't need a warrant in any capacity in order for the U.S. government to collect communications intelligence on foreign persons.
Is that because of the Patriot Act, or no? Is that more?
No, that's just constitutional, right? We can
okay.
collect on anybody that we want if they're not U.S. citizens and they're not in the United States, right? And every other country does it to every other country. It is what it is. Now, a lot of other countries, though, collect on their own people without a warrant, but we don't do that in the United States. You have to have a warrant. Now, FISA was originally
warrant.
Yeah, no, you definitely need
you need a judge to sign off on the activity, so that way a case can be built correctly, right, Jonathan?
Yeah. So FISA was originally, prior to 702, FISA was originally created because there were very technical means that we were using in order to collect information on foreign adversaries that we could not testify to in open court. So we needed a way to present classified information to judges, juries, other persons that could make decisions on this behavior without letting it get out, because we cannot let sources and methods get out, because we're going to lose sources and we'll lose methods, which is not what you want to do when you're in the collection world, especially when you have allies overseas and you're gathering information from people in France and Afghanistan and Iraq, right? It's just not good business. So 702, that wasn't really that big of a concern. People didn't really ultimately have a problem with that. 702 got funky because it allows the United States to collect content, not only the metadata, so that's the to and from and the date and location and all those things, but the content of a conversation with an individual who is considered foreign and on a target list. But what happens if that person is having a communication with a U.S. citizen? So half of the conversation is foreign. It's the reason it came up on the government's radar. But now the other end of that conversation is a U.S. person's phone number. And so they needed a process, especially after 9/11, which is where all the 702 stuff came from. How do we quickly ensure that this conversation is not something that could lead to a terror attack on the United States? So what they did is they allowed the government, through a specific process through FISA, to unmask the individual who's communicating with that person that has the foreign connection. And it's very limited in scope. It's not every FBI agent in the world. It is limited to senior individuals in certain agencies in the U.S. You have to give it to your boss, to your boss's boss, to your boss's boss, right? And they're the only ones that can unmask. And they can determine who that person is. And if that person is a U.S. citizen, then there's a whole nother process they have to go through in order to try to get a warrant to continue pursuing content on the U.S. citizen. Okay. It's a complicated process, but after 9/11 is a much needed process. And I can attest, without detail, I can attest to FBI Director Christopher Wray's testimony in Congress recently, where he gave examples of FISA 702 collected information that stopped certain behaviors from other countries, particularly China in this scenario, in most recent scenarios, that that the U.S. populace would not be happy with the intelligence community if we didn't find out about it and then something happened. So, it's a good problem to have. And what I mean by that is,
I think that's a catch-22 as well, as far as having having the knowledge and know-how of stopping foreign adversaries from hurting the United States in a way, but then also not necessarily the knowledge of having the information of its own citizens in general. So I mean I know that there's laws and ways and things of that nature as far as governmental hacking and things that have gone not necessarily unnoticed, but there's a lot of shadier things that go behind the scenes that are like, all right, well, this will get us to where we need to go, but we can't use it to get there, if that kind of makes sense. So like, let's say me and you were talking and I said, hey, I'm going to probably commit a crime, next week over at blah, blah, blah bank. And then you take that information and you're like, oh man, he's going to commit a crime. He told me. But, being in the position that you're in, what do you do with that information?
Yeah, I guess what I would be curious on in the same area is there a such thing where I would call it, and tell me if I'm calling it wrong, but is there a such thing as soliciting a crime?
When you mean such thing, like a legal thing?
So yeah, well, say there's 10 undercover cops in one room, and there are like two guys, and these undercover cops are like really trying to push the envelope for the two people to talk about encourage the act of a crime by continuously keeping in character and influencing the idea. Wiretaps released throughout court hearings and all that nice crap. You get to kind of experience what you would be in that scenario where you're like, well, hold on now. The majority of these people were already informants, and they're the ones that are wanting the two who don't really seem for. And by the way, I'm pointing out maybe a one case scenario that this has happened, sure. But I call it soliciting a crime. Is that a terrible thing to call it?
No, so people
and
ask
we're
me
not
that.
We're not telling you to hurt yourself in any way for any particular.
I'm just saying, like, if we're on the land of conspiracies, if it's a slow day and you're like, fuck, I know those two jerk offs in front of the gas station could give me about a week's worth of shit to do.
I'm tracking. I used to get that question a lot because people don't understand how the law works in particular. So they say things like, well, if you send an undercover cop into a house and you weren't there in the first place, but you showed up and you asked somebody for crack and that person sold you crack, aren't you just making them commit the crime? Isn't that you just soliciting them and their behavior? And the answer is no, that's completely legal because the police officer in that event or the CI in that event didn't force anyone to commit a crime. They just asked them if they would do it. And usually, by the way, we don't waste resources on law enforcement officers or CIs by sending them to people that we don't think commit crimes anyways, just to convince them to commit a crime. It doesn't work that way. So we just don't.
So you hear that conspiracy theory, people? It doesn't happen. You're out of your minds.
It's not that it doesn't happen. There are humans in every aspect in every job, right? There are bad cops and there are bad army guys and there are bad everybody. And so, I would be being naive and hard-headed if I said, well, that doesn't happen in law enforcement. We don't break the rules. That's not true. Cops break the rules. But the system is pretty damn good. And usually when cops break the rules, you all hear about it because it gets on the media because somebody blew in the cop for doing something wrong, whether it was the person that was the citizen or the judge found out or whatever. So what I can tell you is that when cops get jammed up, it comes out.
I always say to, whenever people do bring up to both me and Tony or Sparky, if there's a crazy conspiracy theory out there, we don't try to like dismiss it because there's, I always say if you add a lot of money and then also add equal parts bad intentions, you got some weird shit that can happen coincidentally, one after another.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. I mean, 15 years ago, I say we, but the law enforcement community up here, 20 years ago, law enforcement community up here had a problem because we had a Schenectady narcotics officer that was stealing crack out of the evidence locker. He was smoking half of it and selling the other half.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
great.
I mean that happens. I mean, he was an addict and he had problems, and
This is
all
why
the
I don't
cases
work
that
there
he-
anymore, Tony. I told you there was a reason.
I have a friend of a friend who will go unnamed that is a CI for Chinese rub and tug places.
Sure. Oh yeah.
Um, so
Yeah.
how many of those?
I like how
particular
you finger banged the fucking word Chinese. Like that
Yeah.
was a bad word. Chinese. Fuck palace. Like, dude, what? You did the wrong one. Just said the quiet part loud.
Oh, my face is red. My face is red. So, rub and tug places, but not necessarily in there for rub and tug, but maybe for trafficking, becomes a bigger picture for that. So, how does that actually go into the picture as well, as far as seeing different crime than you were originally coming in for?
Oh, you could
How often
definitely.
does that actually happen?
Yeah, it certainly happens, and it happened in my experience. You can send in a CI, say, to a house that they know is selling fentanyl pills, for example, right? And it actually happened in a case recently that I did when I left the AG's office before I came over to do Army stuff, and we were purchasing fentanyl from this certain house. And in the house, we found out after we got into the house with the CI that they were also building ghost guns and selling guns to gang members all over the street. So once that information is available to you after you've already been in there, the CI can come back out and go, hey, listen, I bought my $20 worth of crack, but guess what? There were 15 handguns on the table.
Damn.
And it looks as if they're making ghost guns because they're all taken
Just to
apart.
clarify.
No, wait. Yeah, I was gonna say
ghost
a
guns
ghost
are
gun.
not guns they're giving to ghosts and shit. They are
Sorry,
guns
yeah.
that cannot be traced. We don't want people thinking, oh my god, they're fucking contacting the other side.
Untraceable.
Yeah, so no, sorry. So ghost guns it's a street term, colloquial term for gun kits that are purchased online typically, and they're
With zero
originally for
serial
gun
numbers
enthusiasts.
and
Yep, and they don't have any serial numbers. Now, legally what happens is you're supposed to purchase the gun kit and then go have the barrel serialized. That's what you're supposed to do, but a lot of people don't do it, and therefore they're called ghost guns because they're not untraceable in the sense that if you shoot it and you kill somebody, we're going to be able to figure out where it came from because we'll match the round to the barrel. But it doesn't have a serial number in the same way that doesn't get tracked through the ATF. But anyways, you can then develop more probable cause through that same CI, just as an example, to charge that person with the possession of those weapons. You can't do it just because you saw them on a table. You have to go forward and gather more probable cause in order to get a warrant for those guns. But yeah, we have secondary or ancillary crimes pop up all the time.
all right, so we're gonna move into the true conspiracy of the next one, chemtrails.
Chemtrails.
Yeah. So what's the conspiracy that they?
That the federal government is drugging people on a daily basis through chemtrails.
That every time that
manipulating.
chemtrails are put in the sky, people start to argue with each other. They get angry. They start fighting. Crime goes up when they look at the chemtrails. Sort of like the full moon effect, only made by airplanes, because why not?
Yeah. What I can say is we don't have the money for that, and chemtrails are real. You could just ask
What are
the
you
fire
talking
pilot how it
about?
actually
We got
works.
the money
And,
for that. We got the money. We got the
Come
money.
on.
I don't know what
Print
the
their
purpose
own
would be,
money.
We're 30. We show everybody our books, and you're like, so I get the number and I know the meaning of it, but why is there a minus sign in front of it? It's like, oh well, those are IQs, just as good as money. The what is it now? The new way of kicking the can down the road, basically, where we are borrowing off of infinity, is totally workable on from my approach. Where fiscal economics and the old way of thinking of economics is completely blown off of the water, and there's a new modern way to look at money. If you're familiar with that, but we'll get, geez, I can go on for days about that.
That's true.
Yeah, you won't get
That's
any
true.
argument from me that maybe we're borrowing a little bit too much money, but you will get an argument from me that there's drugs coming out of the back of F-16s flying over Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I just don't think that's the case. But
Pennsylvania, Jonathan, you from Pennsylvania or no?
I'm from Saratoga Springs, New York.
New York. We here in Pennsylvania, they think that nothing was invented in northeastern Pennsylvania. We actually were the first state, we're the first region to discover and invent at the same time depression.
Good for you.
It was a sad
fantastic.
fucking time. We were like that motherfucker.
On every corner.
That
On every corner.
Yeah.
Yeah, to re-clarify, the modern monetary theory is a macroeconomic model posting that countries that issue their own currency, such as U.S., are not constrained in their spending. So you can spend as much as you want. If anybody questions it, shoot them in the head and take their stuff and then say, see how strong our currency still is?
Kevin, I got two big ones coming up on the list here. I hope you're ready.
I'm ready.
All right. Number 1, Area 52.
Ooh. Yeah, I can't. I'm not going to speak about that. What I will say is that
just wink.
Yeah, there are certainly facilities that the United States government has where they build crazy technology, and they've been doing it for years, and they're going to continue to do it because they're always trying to be one step ahead of the enemy.
I always like my only example of when people tell me about how Donald Trump is going to start changing things. I said the only thing Donald Trump changed really is he went down to Area 51 and they said, Mr. President, what are you doing down here? He says, I heard there was an RC Cola machine. Everybody likes Diet Coke. Everyone I know likes Diet Coke. We should have a Diet Coke machine here. Everybody agrees. All of my friends that work here, including you.
A McDonald's vending machine would be perfect right here.
And they're like, so that's why we have a Diet Coke machine? Yep. He didn't ask to see anything? No. He literally was going on for a hot half an hour about Diet Coke and then made a slight innuendo about how RC Cola might be raping Mexicans or something. I don't know. It went off the wall for a little while, but we now have a Diet Coke machine here, which is good, I guess.
Good for them.
It changed lives right there. It's the and you know what I say, the difference between going from Donald Trump to Joe Biden is like a Coke machine back to a fucking RC Cola machine.
Right.
We're back to what now?
Right.
Joe Biden gets up there, he's like, listen, everybody likes Royal Crown, it's good soda, it's 50 cents, put it in your mouth, you drink it, suntan lotion. What?
Look, our final one on the list. Our final one on the list.
Internet, Tony. We've overboiled the internet to the point where we just have two of the same guys. Go on, Tony. I'm sorry.
Kevin, we're going to break the internet on this one.
Breaking it.
UFOs, UAPs.
Oh, so, okay. I can't speak specifically about anything that is involved in the extraterrestrial world, right? And I know that there were some intelligence analysts that were speaking on this in Congress, and their language was very stulted and it was very specific. And that's not my it's not my realm. What I can say is that it is true that all governments, especially not all, wealthy governments, are involved in generating and building technology and keeping that technology secret, and they don't tell everybody about it. So is it potentially true that other countries have the ability to fly some device around and the US may not know what it is, and the populace may not know what it is, and then you call it a UFO you want, or AUP or whatever, but yeah, that stuff is real. I mean, I don't know how many people in the American government would or the American populace would have accepted the fact that there was a Chinese balloon that was floating over the United States at 35,000 feet.
I mean, I would, because I've seen episodes of the Three Stooges, and shit like that can happen, man. It happens to them all the time. They're just like, they're up there, they got a balloon and shit. They're like, laughing at each other. They're going up way too high. I mean, we have documentation of that happening in the 1920s. No, I'm joking. I have no idea.
Sure. I guess what I would say is that when people claim to have seen things that, they don't understand, it's more likely that maybe it's just something that we haven't seen that somebody else has built. That would be my guess, but
In your own opinion, do you think not non-extraterrestrial?
In my own opinion, non-extra meaning like it's just all human, or it's
Yeah.
I mean, I live my life often on Occam's razor, which is the simplest explanation is most likely the right one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I like that, and with that, I'll allude into this. The conspiracy I thought Tony was going to get to, but we really need to just touch on one for 1 second. And
Sure.
Jeffrey Epstein.
Oh God, here we go.
Come on. You just said the simplest explanation, right?
I was just trying to get into governmental conspiracies and not necessarily.
Well, there you go, Tony. Now every check mark is drawing him towards being a CIA agent or working in some capacity for the government. A person just doesn't disappear like that unless you're fucking Scott Bakula from Quantum Leap. You don't just lose camera footage, old 60s style, where everything just seems to fuck off for an hour. And now the guy, they're like, hey, how about his body? They're like, would you believe it or not? Last time this happened was about 2,000 years ago. He rose into the heavens. Fucking weird shit. Weirdest stuff we ever saw. Well, we actually didn't see it, but we're assuming all that happened because we heard halos going on, a lot of shit. It's almost like the person that lied for the government professionally said to himself, this is my last day. What the fuck?
Yeah. Listen, the Epstein case is pretty complicated, and that's all I know about it. So I'll just say it feels
weird that the mass public would not let go of it until they had something else bigger to grasp onto, which after that rhymes with COVID, and everyone was told stay inside and wash your fucking hands and shut up. And for whatever reason, somebody who might have been connected in a higher space to Epstein wanted everyone to focus on how long 6 feet away from somebody is, whether a mask or a vaccine was a good idea. It was a very calculated, in my opinion, if I want to distract everybody away from, hey, shut up about this guy for a little bit, cool it down for a moment, because everybody was asked, how do you like the fair? Oh, the fair is great. Epstein didn't kill himself. Like, damn it, we couldn't cut him off quick enough. So,
I guess the major question is
you
the
lost
cup
me
and
on the
ball
COVID
trick
connection
by the government? Is the cup and ball trick a classic redirection from the government?
Oh, do they do that? Sure.
Oh yeah.
Did they do it with COVID? No.
I mean, it would have been. I mean, it would have been a great idea where it's just like, bring out the virus. I just think my own theory on COVID was they said to themselves that Donald Trump doesn't really listen to when they say, hey, we need you to look at this. He says, I don't need to look at that. And then they're like, all right, well, anyways, here's something you really don't need to look at. Oh, no, bring that one over. So they're like, fuck, man, I got a great idea. How about this? We'll use a little reverse psychology on it, like I do with my fucking fourth grader over here. We'll just say, well, you don't want to really hear about this. This is a story about a bat in China. Oh, no, bring me the bat story. Bring me the bat story.
Yeah.
And away we went, sort of thing.
Yeah, pandemics happen. And
they do.
The other thing that I often like to remind people, I've been in the government for almost 30 years now, and while there are things that, especially in the military, right? The military does really, really great stuff, and we have developed the greatest fighting force that's ever existed on this planet. It's inarguable, but it's still made up of humans, and mistakes happen. And I remember President Obama saying this one time too, and I can't quote him, but he was discussing big decisions that are being made, and he was sitting inside of in the Oval, and he had all of the staff around him, and he was making some national security decision. It might have even been the Osama bin Laden decision, but regardless, at the end of the day, that's still like 15 people in a room just making a decision that they just really don't necessarily know is going to be the right one or the wrong one. So my point is, sometimes things just happen, and like people make mistakes, and like things do get out of control. And that could certainly have happened with COVID. It could have been completely natural. Maybe there was some lab issue tied in. I don't know, but But what seems completely unlikely to me is that there was any intentional screw up where now we've lost millions of people across the globe. No, what's most likely is that people made mistakes and things weren't done well. And we haven't had a pandemic in 120 years. And so we kind of forgot how that works and, all those other things that get tied in. And then people got nervous in the government and they're like, oh shit, I really don't want to lose a lot of people. So maybe we do the distancing thing. If you remember, I was in Kuwait when they took the one ship in the Navy that we had, maybe we'll have two, but one of two, like the medical ships, and they posted it in the harbor in New York City because they thought they were going to lose so many people they couldn't even put them in the morgues in the hospitals, and they were going to put them on the
bread
ship.
trucks.
Yeah, thankfully we didn't have to do that, but it was part of the plan, and it was a government trying to respond to something that definitely got out of control, and mistakes are made, and that it's unfortunate, but that shit happens.
Sparky, what do you got on the big board right there to end our show?
The best conspiracy theory of all time.
Ooh, I'm ready.
Holy crap, weaponizing Madonna's vagina. Yep, this is better than the NFT. I need a ghost gun. Look at that. This is the ghost gun you were talking about there, Jonathan, right? Yes. When an unborn soul comes out of the crevice we only know as Madonna's vagina, you need the ghost gun by your side to get rid of the spirit that exists.
Yes, there you go.
Of the crevices.
She is not. There's an old priest and a new priest there.
It's a sort of exorcism meets Madonna.
Oh yeah.
We've been running that same routine for a little bit of time now. It's funny. It's never getting retired because it's too goddamn funny. Madonna wanted to have her vagina become an NFT one day, a non-fungible token. So Sparky got to work, and we wondered what it would look like. So, but we didn't want to draw the vagina because we are a family show. So we kind of lead it into that idea.
John, if I don't know why people would want to get in touch with you, but if they would like to have you on as a guest, how would they like to get in touch with you?
Oh yeah, you could just email me, Jon Molik at headlinesinhistory.com. That's my the podcast website. Or you could just visit me and contact me through the website at headlinesinhistory.com. And yeah, I'm certainly willing to do.
I know that's one thing that we didn't kind of capture on, just because of not necessarily time constraint, but we've had technical issues today, which is unfortunate. Tell everybody about your show. How can they listen to your show? What is the name of the show one more time?
Yeah, so it's Headlines in History. And it's on any of the podcast sites out there. You can get it on Spotify or Apple or anywhere, Podbean, wherever you listen. As well as I also have YouTube channel, Headlines in History, where I do a bunch of shorts that specifically focus on foreign affairs and military conflict in order to kind of give a showcase as to some of the things that I'll be talking about on the show. And the whole purpose of the show is to talk about current events in today, specifically those that are related, like I had said, foreign affairs and military conflict. But I like to bring a historical perspective in there. And it's for the people that are interested in the nightly news. They hear the 3 or 4 minutes. They're like, that's some interesting stuff. Israel, Gaza, let's say, as one example that's recent. And they want to know a little bit more, but they don't want to be a history professor at the same time, right? So they don't want to buy a book, but they want to hear maybe the 15 minutes of the so what of what this really means. And does it affect me here? And how does the Ukraine-Russia fight really affect us? And is this going to be World War III? And have we already stepped into World War III and those type of things? So I kind of take a topic from the week that I think is the most relevant current affair or current event that relates to the foreign affairs landscape, and then get into it for about 45 minutes to 50 minutes. And sometimes I do that with a guest.
Man, I would love to pick your brain about that.
Yeah, well, the shorts, I've seen your shorts on your page, on your Facebook page, and we have to, well, I'm going to be sharing them on the Podguyz Podcast every week because they're very concise. They get you thinking, and they're non-biased. There's too much amount, where one wouldn't exist if CNN wouldn't exist, if Fox News wouldn't exist. This is basically what happened, why it's where it came from, why it's still going on, and what you can know more about it to better grasp the situation, rather than what politicians are responsible, who did what, why is it a liberal issue, why is it a conservative issue. If you've seen the shorts, Tony, like I've skimmed through when Tony sent me over your link for your page, it is 1,000% watchable. To it's better than the Tulsa King, as is a lot of things. Little bit, not the Sopranos, but we'll get there. No,
I'd rather watch a Madonna birthing video than I'm watching the Tulsa King.
Dude, no, the shorts though are very watchable. They're flippable. I didn't just watch one. I went through the second one, went through the third one, went through the fourth one, and I'm just like, okay, we're gonna have this guy on tonight. Very cool. And then once again, I get on my computer and it's like 9:45. I'm like, that should be plenty of time. 9:50. What are we doing? 9:55. Tony says, "Are you okay?" I'm like, the computer is literally doing nothing.
Why do you have to make me look like the asshole like I did it?
I don't know. I just got a voice for people in my head when I'm like under frustration with technology, where everybody just sounds like that. It's just it's something. But no, Jonathan, it's one of the positives out there on social media that really needs more of a spotlight, in my opinion. And we're giving you the spotlight here. Tony is perfect at always finding guests. 95% of the time. Every now and then, like you said before, we're only human.
60% of the time it works.
And we get some people, they roll in here and you're just like, hey, so why are you here? They're like, I don't know. It's like, me neither. Boom. You just want to cut them, but we'll try our best to just work with what we got here.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I was able to help you a little bit figure out how the world works in a conspiracy theory realm and provide some good content. But now, and I appreciate the compliments. I do. And that's part of the target, or part of the purpose of the shorts and the reels in that way, is to really just kind of give you the so what. And there's so many talking heads out there, and I'm not interested in being the Tucker Carlson or anybody else. I don't need to talk about the politics unless the politics matter.
I know you said flattery is the best policy, but I can't stop listening to you in general. So take that as a compliment. Take it as
there wasn't any trained tone or rhythm to the idea where you were trying to solicit a certain demographic of people or opinion towards it. You're giving it straight, and that's what I appreciate. It was very, very fresh, where we went over this in pre-show, how I feel about rhythms and tones and what they're trying to attract and who they're trying to rile up emotionally, so that way they can garner ratings. And I feel like it's disingenuous to what should actually be going on, as do you, obviously.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. Thank you.
You got it, man.
All right, Sparky, where can you find us, sir?
You can find us on every single major streaming platform, including iHeart, Spotify, Spreaker, Deezer, Castbox, Pocket Cast, GeoReel, Google Video, Facebook Video. You can find our merch at merchbooth.com. You got to go to the podcast section, go down. You can find all your favorite merch.
We're currently working on the website.
We are.
Podguyzpodcast.com.
We are 25% of the way done at the podguyzpodcast.com, where you will be able to find more t-shirt variants, more mugs, pens, all sorts of stuff. Hats, of course. You're going to be able to get a hat like Tony's right there. Only it's going to say the Podguyz Podcast. Sunglasses, you name it. We're going to have our name shoved all over the idea, so you can show your constant support for us, the Podguyz Podcast. We'll have all of our links down below as well to our Twitter, Spotify, iHeartRadio. All of the links, all of the things. You click all of the buttons, and you will be seeing some very hardcore promotions for ourselves to stay not only relevant in your lives on Facebook, but as one of your favorite comedy/interview podcasts out there all around.
True.
Nice.
Big shout out to Jon Molik. Thank you very much for coming on the show today. We appreciate your time. I'm Tony Kaz.
Kevin Neary here.
Of course, the ever-loving Picasso. Let's spark it.
Okay.
Guys, we're the Podguyz Podcast. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great night. Bye.